Hey Los, what's going on tonight? This video is going to be a part of a series of videos that I am going to be making. Eventually, I decided to do these videos in backwards and start with the evidence first, and then the audio essay is going to follow it. It's going to be two videos that are going to be companions of each other. So this video is going to focus around in the remembrance of those that have survived abuse and those that have died from abuse. It's Abuse Awareness Week. And so, what I've actually decided to do is talk about my abuse because a lot of people have picked up on it throughout all the other videos that I've gone and worked on and stuff. I mentioned it briefly, and a lot of people wanted to know more about it, more or less. But that's going to be covered in the first video as far as the entire history goes. So for this video in general, it's going to be going over all of the screenshots and evidence that I had collected from when I was being abused, and to sit there and like talk about the mannerisms and everything else, and as far as going and exhibiting the kind of behavior that she would go and display on a pretty regular basis. So we're going to be filming a very large screen today, a huge ass 70-inch TV that I use as my monitor, and the mouse pointer is going to be used from time to time to go and point out comments, and then we're going to go and talk about those comments, why they're bad, how it revolves around abuse and various other mannerisms. This is going to be talking about mental illness a fair bit, abuse a fair bit, aggression a fair bit. So if any of those are triggers for you, then this video is not for you. I'm not really making these two videos for other people at this point. I'm more along the lines of making them for myself because it's been overdue for quite some time and people have asked me about it. So I'm going to be taking time to go through everything to show people what exactly I was dealing with, more or less. So we're going to go ahead and get down to it. This folder literally is a bunch of screenshots that I and others have collected during our entire time going across Twitch and having to witness various things that my ex had done. And so you're going to find that as I open it, it's quite extensive. We're going to be going through the entire line. All of these folders all have various screenshots. This folder down here at the bottom is just papers that I wrote, back when she was trying to host a smear campaign against me and stuff. Those papers aren't going to be looked at because they're publicly available, and they're most likely going to be covered in the first video. This is literally the archive that I had made from my experience. All the other users that were abused by her across Twitch have made their own archives, and then there's also a large public archive that all of her data is stored in and stuff. So we're going to go ahead and get down to it. So this was a streamer called Queen Homicida, and my ex used to go and moderate for her quite often. And so she eventually, like when she would get around certain streamers, she would kind of develop this attitude. So this guy that she's going and yelling at is a random viewer that walked in, and he had done a sarcastic comment trying to go and call Queen an e-girl. It was meant as a joke and stuff, and Annie had taken it seriously. So she had a tendency to go and have this attitude, as you can see here. Whenever she comes into positions of power, she has a tendency to go and behave very obnoxiously. And so it was common to see comments like this. And then she would kind of take pride in treating others like garbage, and so you would typically see it with comments like this and stuff. The funny thing is about this particular comment here is she didn't really have much self-esteem. Like her self-esteem was actually borderline dead, and so whenever she would come into a position of power, she would behave like this. In real life, she wouldn't behave like this, but on the internet, this is what she would project quite often. And so she doubles down with this comment right here. And she still doesn't understand that the guy had popped in, made a sarcastic comment, and it was meant to be a joke. Essentially, it wasn't meant to be taken seriously whatsoever. And so everybody else in the chat got the joke. The streamer herself got the joke as well, but Annie had a tendency to go and fly off the rails, and so you can literally see him a little bit further down, just going and kind of messing with her a little bit. But she was so far detached from anything that we would call real that she's like going and taking it seriously, and then going and making an ass out of herself. Like she literally could not go and understand the joke, essentially understand the comedy behind it. So this was from another streamer that unfortunately is no longer on Twitch due to a lot of what would happen in her stream with Annie. She lost a lot of her credibility and stuff. So the streamer's name at the time was IRNZO. She went by a bunch of other names as well. This was one of many. And so Alexis would have this tendency to go and try to cuddle up to people, and she would sit there and say, hey, I'll never leave you, I'll always be here and stuff. Like she would just try to sell this idea of, I'm not going anywhere. The reality of the situation is she would only stick around if you kind of kept feeding her attention. Like if you kind of just said, hey, I don't want to be that close to you, she would go have a fit, a little mini meltdown of sorts, and then she would have a tendency to leave. So scrolling through, she would constantly hawk the idea of, so Zoe wanted to go, and at one point she wanted to get into music. And so Annie would have a tendency to tell her, hey, I can help you get big. We can go, we can do this, we can do that. I can help you do this, do that. She would have a tendency to tell the lie of, I've been in many bands, I've been in a large amount of large bands, and it was just really strange because a lot of this could have been fact checked very easily. So the entire time that we were going and we were together and stuff, she never knew what band that she was playing for. I would ask her about it and stuff because I go and I play music. And I can tell you how many shows I've done, the bands I've rolled with, pretty much everything. So she would constantly hawk this idea of her being in the music industry for like a really long time. And at the time that we had broken up and she was having this meltdown in this poor woman's stream, she was going and trying to float the idea that she had been a musician for well over 20 years, and it just never checked out. Like I had investigated it at some point, a lot of the timelines wouldn't really add up. She would say that she was going and playing with certain bands, and the thing is she would be a teenager, at the time when these bands were rolling around. So with this particular block of text, she would constantly bitch about how record executives were throwing her out and stuff. So she claims that she's worked for like a decade and everything else, and then she doubles down. She's like, we worked hard for nothing. But the thing is she's never been in any sort of band that's like traveled around or anything. She's just kind of drifted from job to job, and she's a licensed electrician and stuff, but she's never actually gone on tour or anything like that. With this comment, she claims that she writes music all the time. The 3 years that we were together, she never wrote anything. I continued writing music and stuff, and I was pretty comfortable with it. I would write sheet music as well to go and play music with, and it was pretty consistent with me. But the entire time we were together, she never wrote any sort of music whatsoever. She never wrote any lyrics. She would constantly plagiarize herself as like a hardcore vocalist, and it was just very, very strange. So she doubles down on the lie yet again and says that she still does. And again, I reiterate, I don't remember a time where she actually did any of it. She never brought it up, never mentioned it. Even when I was still writing stuff, she would never, as far as I'm aware, have any music to go and present to me. Like, even if I asked for it, I was like, "What you writing?" And she'd be like, "Oh, I'm writing nothing." She spent most of her days going and hanging out on Xbox and stuff, hanging out with her friends. She would hang out with me in the evening time. And so that's what she would literally do all day. She wasn't employed at the time. She was going and living off of medical assistance for a bit because she was recovering from a pretty heavy handed illness. And then from there, she had tried to sell her house and barely got anything from it, so she didn't really have any income coming in. And so, she wasn't really musically involved with much of anything. She was just kind of hanging out at home while everything was kind of falling apart. So, most of the chat at this point is kind of taking a look at everything that's going on. This poor man right here was reading all of the text from this chat, and he was like, "What's going on in here?" And then she would go and later on have a little bit of a temper fit and say that she would challenge any of their songs. But again, she's not so much a songwriter. Like, she knows how to play guitar a little bit, but she doesn't actually know how to go and write music per se. She doesn't know how to shackle it together and stuff, which was really, really odd. So the rest of the people in chat at the time were realizing that she was having a breakdown. Around this point, I was not in this cast. I had watched a VOD of it later after all the shit had hit the fan. I had a friend here who actually moderated, and he had messaged me asking what the hell was going on with her. And at that point, I had gone no contact at the ass end of October of the previous year because the relationship was just bad. Her mental health issues were kind of out of control. And the abuse was getting insane, both emotional and mental. So this guy right here recognizes that she's having a breakdown and stuff. He kind of laughs at it a little bit. I mean, I think it's fucked up, but when you're dealing with something like that, most people don't really know how to respond to it. So she is continuing on with the lie about how she's been involved in the music industry for like a really long time and stuff. Again, she has no history of it. And you can tell because a lot of this information that she's going and passing down is inaccurate. So she says that she's been on the road for years. She's never, as far as I'm aware, been on the road at all. Like, the entire time that we were together, I asked her if she's ever toured. She would constantly tell me no. So she's never been on the road at all. As far as I'm aware, the only musical work that she's done is she does cleanup and setup for stagehanding, essentially. Like, when bands would come into the city that she was living in, they would basically go and hire her to go and do day work to help with setup and tear down and everything else. And so going down, she again continues the lie. And but I don't even really think that this is a lie at this point, in all honesty. Like, we all know that it's a shark infested industry. She's just kind of passing on common knowledge at this point. So the interesting thing about this comment, she's claiming to know that she knew most of the managers that were starting to bleed people in the early 90s. So in the early 90s, she would have been a child. She would have been coming up on her teenage years pretty quickly, but she would have been a child. She's not that much older than me. And in the 90s, I was coming up on my teens as well. She only had a couple of years on me, so there was really no way for her to actually know any of these people in the 90s. And then the lie also doesn't check out because managers were doing this way before the 90s. Like, anybody with any sort of musical knowledge as far as the culture goes knows that this is not a distinct 1990s thing. It was going on long before I was born, and it will be going on long after I am dead. That is just how that is. So, whoops. So, with this next comment about Kurt Cobain and stuff, it's really weird. Kurt Cobain had advanced depression, and then he also had drug issues on top of it. So she makes the claim that he died because they bled him dry, and that's why he killed himself, or at least that's what she's insinuating. But the truth of the matter is we don't actually know why he died. We can assume and stuff and um, everything else, but the only person that knows why Kurt died was, well, Kurt himself, and he's dead. He's never going to be able to tell us and stuff. So at the bottom there, um, I'm not really sure what she's talking about and stuff. It just kind of seems like a junk comment a little bit, and you know, moving on. She always had kind of like this insane level of entitlement. She would have this attitude of, you need to listen to me. I have experience. I know what I'm talking about. You need to listen to me. You need to listen to me. She didn't really have a lot of experience about stuff. She was a very passionate music fan and stuff, but she would constantly hawk things like this. And so she would throw comments like this in people's faces a lot of the time. It's also a lie because she never hung around with Kurt Cobain. Like she never came down to America or anything. She's always lived in Canada. She's never left the Canadian borders per se, and so she would have never been able to meet him. And then when he died, she was also a child at the time as well. So the chances of her actually going and meeting him is, well, it's non-existent. So she says that she knew Cobain. That's a lie. It's not hard to go and debunk that per se. So this next comment, in the early 90s, I was there. We all know that this is a lie, and we know because Kurt's later life is actually heavily documented. Strangely enough, you can read about it a fair bit. And so this is always something that she had kind of struggled with. She would always make weird, like fucking off the wall, oddball claims like this. And I, in all honesty, in the relationship, when we were together, I would see crap like this all the time. I would never know what to do with it because if I tried to call her out on it, she would throw a fit. Like she would literally rage like a child. And it was just so fucking strange. So she continues to lie down the page and claims that she was there when he wanted to record live acoustic. That choice was made in America. She's never been to America. And then she claims that she was in what is it, New York, and then possibly Jersey, depending on how far you want to take it. And so she claims to be there as well. We all know that she's never left Canada, so it would literally never work. So going down, and this guy right here, it's very evident that he goes and well, both these people literally call her out. The first guy is like, are you still in the US? She doesn't answer, obviously. And then with Obey, he kind of mocks her a little bit. He's like, I swear Kurt appeared to me in a dream, and it was just so fucking strange. And so she doubles down on the delusion, and she says, I remember him throwing everyone out of the room. And the thing is again, she's never been to America. She can't witness stuff like this. When Kurt died, she was quite literally a child. Kurt was a lot older than what she realized, and we're gonna see that as a theme with later screenshots. But she kind of doubles down on this, and then as the breakdown continues, like various spelling errors and everything else. But yeah, she was literally never there for it, and then she just continues, and she's like, I was there. Um, Nirvana never played with Story of the Year. Nirvana was gone by the time Story of the Year actually came around and came to prominence and stuff. So they would have never shared a stage together. And even if they were, the ticket for it would have never worked because they're quite literally different genres. So she goes, and we have this other lie here, and it's very, very easy to debunk. So she was trying to claim that he couldn't get a grip on reality because he did like a ton of acid that night. While Kurt did dabble in acid and stuff, he wasn't on a huge amount of like hallucinogenics. Like it wasn't his staple drug of choice per se. So this one is It's very, it was very, very lengthy. So she doubles down on the whole, he took a ton of acid and knocked on the door and said that it was like 10,000 mics or some crap. And I'm assuming she's trying to say micrograms, but I could be wrong. I wasn't there, you know. So we would just kind of continue, and chat would go and have to deal with this over and over and over again. And the story just kind of keeps continuing. And so she was kind of derailed from reality at this point. And then for some reason, she seems to think that Jim Morrison was alive in the 90s. Everybody knows that Jim Morrison had died quite a few years before. You know, he never saw the 80s. He sure as hell never saw the 90s. And so she makes the claim here that he was hanging out with Deep Purple. Deep Purple was broken up at the time. They didn't have their revival until much later, and then finally she says, "Okay, I'm shutting up." Possibly because she's starting to understand that everybody else is taking notice of what the hell it is that she's saying. So she doubles down talking to Zoe, and like Zoe at this point, when I looked at the VOD, Zoe at this point was like, okay, Annie, and I could tell that it was like putting stress on her and stuff. So she keeps saying, I was there, you know, I've been wrecked with Ozzy, and it's just so weird, you know, like the delusions were getting stronger with every comment. And so she tries to say, you know, I swore I'd never say anything, which I would see with a lot of the talks that we would have when she would present something weird and oddball to me. You know, she would say this line specifically. It was a pattern, essentially, that she had. So Bay blatantly points out that Jim died in 73, you know, and Annie takes offense to it because she doesn't like being called out on her lies. So she was like, oh, you think, oh God, the spelling on that. I'm assuming, oh, you think I'm kidding, lol, you know, and so finally, chat starts to rail against her, and she's like, you want to talk, sis? We can talk in private. Whenever somebody calls her out, she has a tendency to run. You know, like she'll run very, very quickly to a private area that she can control, you know, that she can lock down, that she can get somebody by themselves to present the lie to. So, and then Obey starts doing his homework here, and he starts pulling out all of Nirvana's history, including like their first show and everything else. And she says that I can't reveal Jim Morrison's stuff. She has no stuff to reveal. She wasn't born until like the mid 80s, you know, and then Jim, of course, died in the early 70s. They would have never shared the same air together, essentially. So she proceeds to say that Obey is wrong, but whoops. Hold up a second. But she proceeds to say that Obey is wrong, but no worries, and she basically calls him a liar while she like fights to kind of go and defend this delusion and stuff. She would always try to pump herself up a little bit to make herself seem like she's important. And the thing is people can go and debunk lies like this very, very easily. And so she goes, says that he's wrong, goes and you know, calls him a liar more or less. So Bay says he was put in the ground in 73. He goes, does his homework, and she gets even more mad, and she's like, I don't give a fuck what they think. And she starts to rage a little bit. I would see this typically if I called her out on some shit that I knew that it was a lie and say, hon, you know, that didn't happen. I could be greeted with stuff like this very easily. So Obey literally, he's like, hey, you know, Google this crap. Him and Kurt would have never breathed the same air, and um, you know, this poor guy is like trying to rail in this chat against her, and Zoe didn't really want to deal with it. It was making her nervous and stuff. You know, the entire time I'd watched the VOD, and, you know, she was just uncomfortable with the whole thing, and Annie starts to rage, and she's like, I'll put him in the ground before they step on us. And, you know, she would always try to pump herself up to be like this great defender. And she never really was. You know, like the entire time we were together, I would have to handle her problems for her because she wasn't really capable. She didn't want to do it, and it scared her and everything else. And it would, it would eventually go and bleed over, essentially. So a lot of the stuff that I would handle or have to handle or deal with, she would try to say that she did, or she would try to emulate my attitude, my mannerisms. I have the I don't give a fuck mannerism, and she would try to emulate that a lot. So she claims that she's good at it. No, not really. But finally, she goes full rage. And Obey at this point is literally going, and since Annie's trying to gaslight him with the previous text, he flat out says, hey, someone besides me looked this shit up, so I'm not fucking crazy. And so she finally goes and goes full rage mode. You know, the mask kind of comes off all the way, and she's like, fuck with me. And proceeds to double down on the lie. And, you know, it just kind of devolves into a whole fucking shitter web of crap that really just should not be there. So, with this particular block of text, well, this particular archive, the context behind it is that she is claiming that she is a global moderator for Twitch TV. So, please keep this in mind as we go through these shots. So, Zoe is like, oh, I'll just mod you, Andy, it's fine. And she's like, you know, don't ever mod me, you don't have to. I like not being a mod, but the weird thing is all the streams that she would visit, she would gun really hard to get a sword. Like all of the prominent streams that she was in at the time, she would literally muscle in and try to get a sword as fast as she could, and she would just devote herself until she got it, and then she would just promptly fuck off to another stream. So she's claiming that she worked for 4 years as a global mod. The reason that this didn't work is at this time, global modhood only existed for like a year and a half, so there would be no way for her to do this for 4 years. And then it gets worse because she goes and states that because global mod is a whole different ball game, because you have to get on Twitch and automatically have to work. So the problem with this is that global modhood is actually on a volunteer basis. You don't get paid to do it. They don't force you to do it. They just literally go ahead and do this to people, well, for people that go and they're around the platform a lot. And like Global Modhood is literally ran by a bunch of volunteers and stuff. And it was to alleviate pressure of not being able to have a ton of staff on site all the time. This is basically the solution that they had shortly after the Amazon buyout. So this is a blanket lie. If you go on Twitch, there's a couple of tools that you can actually use, a bunch of plugins actually that you can get for Chrome and Brave and everything else. And so it'll tell you how long a person's been on the platform, all the names that they've had. You can look at a person's chat history. If the chat's public, you can't do it with whispers. You also have other things like twitchtools.3vi, which is literally, it shows you all the swords they have. Like, there are tools out there to actually go and look at stuff like this. So she says, I'm used to chats at 2K. The highest amount of people that she's ever had to moderate is literally a little bit over 360, and that was for Sidecar Angel, who was a caster that she used to moderate for that actually had a pretty good amount of size to her. So she says, I literally work for way too many people on Twitch. I need a place to relax. I don't really know what work she was talking about at the time, because most of the time we were literally hanging out on Xbox in parties, you know, and just gaming together. And so I don't really see how she can sit here and make this statement, because you can't mod and game heavily at the same time. You can't go and do a raid with your girlfriend at the time and then claim to be modding. It just wouldn't really work. So she goes and she just kind of doubles down on it. I'm not kidding. I'm not even joking. And so this is what nailed her to the floor, more or less. She claimed that she had stepped down from moderating for Elohim because he had 4,500 viewers. Elohim wound up nailing her to the floor on Twitter, saying, hey, I have no idea who the fuck you are, more or less. Stop besmirching me. You've never modded for me. You're not a global mod. I've never seen you before. You know, the list goes on, and that's going to be covered more in depth in the first video. So, scrolling down, um, you can see this little block of text here. LOL, my friend Lucky Misfit still community manages, and then yeah, you have the rest of it there. Lucky was never her friend. Lucky had no idea who the hell she was. Like, they kind of knew each other in passing. Like, you see a person, you wave, you say hi, all that stuff. And so, Lucky had to come out and say, hey, whatever damage this woman's done, I'm sorry. Like, Lucky didn't have to apologize for it, but she chose to, you know, and it just wasn't really that great, you know. And so she says, "Oh, I need a break," but again, she wasn't really moderating that much. She sure as hell never moderated for any of these people. So this gentleman here flat out asks her, "Do I know you as well?" Because at this time she had gone through a bunch of names. Her last one being Annihilator 9, and she would go into other streams and do stuff like this as well. So this person kind of recognizes her pattern of typing and everything else, and the guy kind of laughs. He's like, "LOL." Annie recognizes this fact, like, oh crap, you know, somebody recognizes me, and she's like, sorry, I'll shut up, have a good stream. And so she later replies to him and says, if you've been around Twitch, you do. But she only was hardcore modding for about 5 people at the time. 3 of those people weren't really ever on Twitch that much because of life obligations and various other things. So she tries to, this guy right here, his name is Ghost Dog 2, and he was one of her closer friends. I used to be friends with him as well. When I had broken everything off and realized what kind of people she was hanging out with, I did a complete purge of all of our mutuals that I had met through her. So he tries to go and shackle her into it. And she's like, ask Ghosty, I used to be a global mod. Well, Ghosty knows better. You know, he's not really willing to go and answer that because it's incriminating and it makes him look bad, more or less. So he doesn't say anything. She later states, oh, I walked away for a reason. She can't walk away from something she never did. So shit starts to get weirder, and she's like, oh, I don't need a sword to throw someone out of your chat or ban somebody from buying internet. So she has no capability for any of this. She doesn't, to throw somebody out of somebody's chat, she would need to orchestrate a DDoS attack. She doesn't know how to do that. She's not computer literate. She doesn't have the capability of banning anybody from buying internet. She doesn't have that kind of authority. Twitch in general doesn't have that kind of authority. You know, it's just, there's not really much of anybody that has that authority, maybe aside from the Canadian government, but, you know, it's just kind of how it is. And so she doubles down, complains that it's people always wanting me to work. I can't do it forever. Again, she was unemployed at the time, didn't really mod for many and stuff, so it's really weird to see her complain about, you know, having to work and for work forever and do all this stuff. And she's sitting there saying the reason why I like it here so much is because people don't know I'm a global mod. Well, you know, if you didn't really want people to know that you're a global mod, it probably would have been better to just not say anything. And so Ghosty here, you know, he's like, hey, you know, I don't want to be a part of this. And um, Zoe around this comment said, it's going to be okay, Annie. Like, she realizes Annie's having a breakdown. And um, Annie was like, Hunt, I'm trying. And so this guy's like, what do you want to do? And then she doubles down on the lie and says it's hard when everyone asks you to drop what the fuck you're doing and investigate Twitch reports. That's not how global modhood works. Again, you know, showing the she doesn't actually know what the hell it is that she's talking about and everything else. And so the entire time that we were together, she had substance abuse issues with pills and alcohol. And you can see that right here. I'd rather get fucking drunk. And, you know, it wasn't really getting any better, per se. Okay. So this is another lie. And she's trying to say that she's opened for this band above. She's never opened for any band at all. Like no band that's relevant. She's never. This kind of ties into the lie of going on the road and touring. She has this giant illusion of being a rock star, essentially, which is really, really weird. And I'm not really sure where it comes from. And so, she goes, she realizes what she's doing. She's like, I'm going to go ahead and shut up now. And it just kind of continued rolling downhill. This was literally over the course of a single day, more or less. And it just wasn't really getting any better. Okay. So this was towards, as far as I'm aware, this was towards the end of the cast, if memory serves. And so she's like, I hide nothing. I don't give a fuck if you screenshot what I say. Very ironic. I don't need a mod sword to kick people out of chat anyways. Again, she doesn't know how to do a DDoS. She doesn't have the any of the equipment needed for it or any of the horsepower. So she realistically wouldn't be able to do this. It's not something that she would be able to do. And so she doubles down and she's like, I don't need to be a mod to end people. Honestly, I'm just agreeable because I choose to. Oh god, I gotta get some new glasses. Holy shit. But this right here is her showing you who she really is. Like the mask kind of comes off, and I was telling people for a while when I had dumped her, more or less, that I was like, yeah, she's not what everybody thinks she is. And this is kind of, this line right here is kind of a shining example of that. She is a rather soulless human being underneath that has like a lot of anger issues. And once I had started seeing that, I just kind of said to myself, oh, it's time for me to go, more or less. It just wasn't really getting any better. And so you see these people in this chat here, they're subjected to this, and she's kind of showing them who she is, and it's just bad. So let's see. We went through that. We went through. Oh, yep, here we go. So after the drunk comment, she goes and she's like, honestly, do you know how hard it is to trace a VPN that bounces off 5 different world locations and then give the real locations to Twitch? Like, she kind of had this other delusion. So I'm nerdy. The entire time that we were together, I am very networking and security centric. And I would go and I would tell her about it because I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed working on security quite a bit, and so she would try to pass this crap off as things that she has done. Now, I've never traced a VPN that bounces off 5 different world locations and given it to Twitch, but I would frequently help people seal up their networks and address their security woes. And so she doubles down on it, and chat wasn't really buying it per se, and it was just a fucking mess. So she doubles down, as you can see here, and then we have this long comment here, and it's just really weird. Like, she's trying to sit there and say that she helped somebody who was being stalked by what is it? Some prick stalked their girlfriend and tried to hurt her, but you found his text messages, logs, and send reports to 3 companies to keep, blah, 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 off the internet and buy them and prevent them from buying internet. This shit doesn't happen at all. She would always have like this delusion of, oh, look at me, I can go and I can do all this stuff. Look at me, I'm a hero. And I typically would see this if her self esteem was like starting to dip. She would kind of pull this shit out of the woodwork, and it would be like, oh god, why is this like this? And it gets weirder because I dabbled in programming for a bit, and I would talk to her about it in terms of AI development, things like that. And so she would eventually say, I can literally send an AI to search and oh god, that's so small. I can literally send an AI in search and destroy mode to fuck you in the ass. And again, it's a very large stretch. And Twitch had a tendency to just kind of humor crap like this, and it was getting kind of out of hand. So she's like, I don't do it to good people, but I wrote an AI that learns and attacks back in Omniplex protocols. Omniplex was a project that I had worked on back when I was in college, and I had talked to her about it. It was just basically a very, very basic project that was just meant to handle really basic tasks, and we had a really, really fun time working on it, but it wasn't anything like this, literally. And so it was really weird how she was taking chunks of my life, starting to distort it, and then graft it into her life, and it was just really strange. And so she claims, oh, I can track an IP address and leave somebody without internet and cut somebody off from hurting you. And again, it's the hero narrative that she would frequently try to go and push. And she doesn't know how to track IPs, like at all. She has no clue even how to get started on it. And it was like, I kind of read this and I kind of laughed a little bit. And it was just kind of insane. And so she's like, I wrote that shit. And then she's like, that's why men don't scare me. And it was just like really, really obnoxious. So later on, she says, I have that nerd brain. She's like a gaming nerd, per se. Like, she's a gaming nerd. She's a little bit of a music nerd, but she's not actually like a programming nerd or a hardware nerd. She's not like an original stock nerd, more or less. And so anytime technology would break down around her, I would have to show her how to fix it. Like if she had problems with her iPhone and everything else, I would literally have to show her how to fix it. And it was just really strange that she was making this comment when the entire time together that we had, I would literally have to go and show her how to do this. And it was very unusual, you know. And so her ego kind of swells up a little bit. And um, the streamer at the time was like talking about other people, and it was like, fuck that, I can take them. And then her ego inflates more, and she's like, you better pray. And it's just really, it's just really strange, you know. Like the whole conversation in general was going from, what is it, bad to worse. So her mental state continued to deteriorate, and she's like, you know, don't make me make you lose this game. And she's like, I can do it, and you know it. She was trying to insinuate that she can kick Zoe off of the internet, obviously, at this point. And obviously, at this point, you know, it's not going to happen. I mean, it's just her going and, like, having these issues. And so she states, I can ruin anybody, and you know it. The weird thing is she doesn't ruin anybody. You know, like she literally can't do anything. And like she would threaten people all the time, but she would never really have the ability to go and have anybody just go and get completely fucking wrecked like that. And it was just really, really strange. I think like her ego was so inflated at this point, it was just really unreal. And so when the mask comes off, you know, I would have to deal with stuff like this. She would get really aggressive and stuff. And this behavior even extended over to my own stream. You know, before this particular cast happened, I would go and have to deal with this, and she would threaten me on my cast. So she just continues at this point with this text. There is nothing really new to report. It's just the same damn delusion. I'm super uber big hacker person, and I'll strip their internet and kick them out of chat, mod sword or not. And it was just really fucking weird. So let's see. So eventually, what would happen is she would sit there and say, if chat wasn't giving her enough attention, she would be like, I'm going to go away now. And basically, what she's insinuating is, I'm going to go and kill myself. Anytime that, throughout our entire relationship, anytime that I would go and not give her attention or anything like that, she would just be like, oh, I'm going to go away now. I should go away, hun. And it's like a very thinly veiled suicide threat, more or less. And then normally the chat would literally go and revolve around her a little bit to try to give her attention because, you know, suicide bad, you know, we gotta try to stabilize this person. And then she would bounce back to normal. So that's pretty much what this entire wall of text is. She thought that everybody had hated her at this point. She's like, I'm ready to go away and leave everybody happy. I love you all. And again, thinly veiled suicide threat. And when I had broken up with her, I mainly did it because of the abuse. I mean, even with the lies and stuff, I was like, okay, you know, she's a little quirky. She has mental health issues, but the abuse was so extreme that there was no there was no way in hell I was able to stay in the relationship. And so I would routinely see stuff like this as well. Like if the argument wasn't going her way, she'd be like, fuck it, I'm just going to go kill myself. It was a lot of, for me at least, it was a lot of tension to go and carry, more or less. You know, like it was a hell of a lot of tension to go and carry, and it just wasn't really that great. So Ghost is like, hey, stay with us. And I think he understood that this was a thinly veiled suicide threat and stuff, and he was just trying to literally keep the peace. So at this point, she was kind of going through hell. She had lost her house. She didn't want to go and get a job and stuff. She had job opportunities, but she's like, oh, it's hard work. And so she's like, I'm sorry, but I try every day and I lose. And I'm ready to go to the other side again. Thinly veiled suicide threat. And she had plenty of options, you know, right up until I had broken up with her. I was giving her plenty of support and stuff, financial and otherwise. You know, I would help her with whatever it was that she needed. And so it was just really kind of strange, I think. And so everybody starts going and trying to give her attention, essentially, you know, be like, hey, don't do this, stay strong, yada yada. And so Zoe at the time was talking about how she was going through some shit. Like everybody was going through shit at that time, and he was like, you don't have to do it alone. And um, she doubles down on the lie of her being in a band and being a solo artist, and she's like, someone that's made it and sold 36,000 albums on their own is sad too. And she would constantly flex shit that she's never done to people. Like even if somebody was going through some shit, she would literally go and try to make it about herself, which is what you see here. You know, oh, I've made 36,000 albums. I'm sad too. And the streamer was going through some shit, and Annie was always constantly trying to go and get it to revolve around her, which wasn't really that great. And so she's like, we can go through the sadness together. And say that, you know, we have people that care for us waiting on the other side. And it was going from bad to worse, essentially. And it was just kind of like a really horrible fucking experience. So this one is a little bit weird. She had this delusion for a while, and this was going on long before this cast. She would constantly say, oh yeah, I know Matt Heafy, I've met Matt Heafy, yada yada yada. Fun fact, he streams on Twitch. And when I went in there to check, and this is one of the reasons why I wound up breaking up with her, because shit was just going off the rails at this point. um, he has no idea who the hell she is. And that's when I realized that something was seriously wrong, that the lie was stretching a lot further than it really had any right to be. And so she's like, I know Matt Heafy messaged me and told me that when he made the channel, it was originally Kichi Chaos Reigns, and that he changed it to be personal to him. And so she goes down and she claims, I've known Matt for 20 years. The problem with this claim is that Matt is substantially younger than her. Like she literally has, I think, like damn close to a fucking decade on him. And so she, first off, she's never been to the States. You know, Matt's an American. And so she would have never been able to meet him. And then second off, he would have been way too young. He would have literally not even been a teenager yet around this time. And so it's kind of backfired a little bit. And so she goes and says, hey, you know, have you, what is it? Have you seen this? Have you seen that? I know this, I know that, you know, the same stuff that I would typically see. And so she claims that, you know, she met Matt Heafy when they opened up for Testament at the Generator Cabaret in '96. Trivium didn't come along until way later. Then she was trying to say that she met Matt Heafy in the '90s, and then that wasn't really there wasn't really the truth either. You know, again, he would have been a kid, and then she's like, you know, he likes my art, but he doesn't know her. So she goes, I've opened up for Tool and Nickelback and AFI. We can get Matt to host you one day, but, you know, yada, yada, yada. And so I would see this a lot as well. She would kind of go and sell this notion of, hey, I can go and I can show you, I can go and I can show you this band and that band, and I know this band and that band, and I can do this and that. And like, it was just really kind of weird because um, she doesn't know how to, well, she doesn't know any of these people. You know, she doesn't know how to run bands either. It's just an oddball thing, I think, and it was just really, really fucking awful. And so the band that she's attempting to go and scalp here is Everlit. And so she says, oh, this is my buddy Ryan singing and everything else. This bloke has no idea who the hell she is at all. You know, like they had a brief exchange on Twitter, and so she's going and trying to do stuff like this. So she continues saying, oh, hey, this person's my friend, this person's my friend. And again, none of them know her whatsoever. And so these folks have never met her whatsoever. And they're also American, I believe. I could be wrong. I don't know much about the band, but I'm pretty sure that they're American. And again, you know, she's never left Canada. So let's see. 36 crazy fists. Let's okay. This comment's actually kind of funny when she's like, "LOL, I know bands. It's amazing how many people think I'm full of shit when I say that." They don't think, they know. There's there's a large difference there. Like they can just go and do the math and stuff. And she claims that she's a sound engineer. She has no idea how the hell to do it whatsoever. The entire time I was working on a lot of my music, she had no idea what I was doing. And so I would go and I would try to teach her and stuff, be like, okay, we're doing this, this, and this. We're going to go ahead and learn a little bit about post production. And it just kind of went from bad to worse, I think. And it just wasn't really that great. And being a sound engineer doesn't mean that you record major record label bands. You know, it just means that you go and you work in post production or whatever the hell specialty it is that you're doing in that particular line. And so she's never recorded any major label band. So she kind of rails against the chat, sitting there saying she doesn't need to be around people, that she's been self sufficient, which, um, you know, she's never done anything like this. And she kind of doubles down on her ego and she's like, I'm not so helpless and I can create music and happiness and all this other stuff. And it just wasn't really that great. So she doubles down and says that I've been a pro musician since ages ago, like 1995. In 1995, she would have literally not even been a teenager yet. You know, and it was just very, very weird. Like, she is grossly unaware, I think, of most of the stuff that is falling out of her mouth, and it's very, very oddball. And so there's like just various other lies that she just kind of vomits up, and it just kept going from bad to worse, more or less. You know, like shit was officially rolling downhill, I think. And oh man. So she goes and she would victimize herself quite a bit, and she'd be like, you know, I do everything, every breath I take to make life more bearable for everyone else, and I give up everything to get thrown away like garbage. And this was a direct crack at me going and breaking up with her. She didn't really contribute much to the relationship. It was definitely like a one sided thing. And so at the time, I was pulling the finances because she had no employment and I had a little bit of a savings at the time. And so I was pulling finances for most of her bills and stuff, food, things like that. If she needed a hand with anything, I would go ahead and give it to her. You know, that's pretty much how the hell that was. And it didn't really get any better. So since it was one-sided, it was one of the reasons why I just kind of opted to leave. So this one is let's see. This one's talking about like growing up without a family, and she says that she learned to take care of herself, but the truth of the matter is that she's had like a whole smorgasbord of people that have taken care of her as time has gone on. And so the weird thing is she's sitting there saying, "I'm finally starting to put myself out there after the last boyfriend I had that I was physically close to tried to sell me to a trafficker." She would talk about this quite a bit. She would tell me this weird story of, oh, I was abducted and I fought them all and I got away and I was raped by literally a couple hundred men and like all this other stuff. And it was very strange because when I had got around to investigating it, I found no mention of it, no record of it. It was just really, really strange. And so the weird thing is at this point she makes no mention of the relationship that we had and stuff. Instead, goes and states, "Oh, hey, you know, the last person I was with was a guy that tried to sell me to a trafficker," and it was really weird. So she's like, "Sorry, I said too much. I'll shut up." So let's see. So she states, "My last boyfriend is in prison for 25 years, so it's hard to get close and put myself out there for anybody." At this point, we had, since I had broken it off with her, we were together almost 3. And so I have no idea how the hell she can sit there and say, you know, oh, yes, my last boyfriend is in prison for 25 years and then have this extreme gap of time. Everybody in this chat knew that we were together and stuff, and they had taken note of it, per se, and it was very, very oddball. So it just wasn't really getting any better, more or less. So this is where she says, "I got hurt by 178 men in 13 days, and it's taken me 7 years to even get to a point where I consider putting myself out there." I'm not really sure what she's talking about with 7 years because we had been at this point dating since early 2016, and the relationship had ended almost in 2019, like the ass end of 2018, more or less. So when I had gone again to check, because she had told me this guy's name, you can look up, since she's claiming, oh, hey, he's in prison, you can go and look up to see if they're out there and stuff in the prison population, and I wasn't able to find anything on it. So at this point, I wasn't really able to tell if any of this shit was actually a lie or not. I was led to believe that it is because I did my homework on it. I checked and stuff and everything else, and I couldn't find anything on it, so I had to write it off as a delusion, more or less. So she was like, "People wonder why I struggle with depression. I didn't ask for what happened," and it's really weird because her mask would slip and then she would change faces quite often. So you can see her boomerang, and she's like, "You wash your fucking ass," and tries to joke about it and stuff and everything else. And it just wasn't really that great per se. And it was just kind of weird because she had become, well, I don't know if she became good at throwing on faces or if it was just always there and I never really noticed it. So she goes and she's like, "Well, now you know part of my life story." And she kind of tries to give it this air of mystery, which is really fucking oddball. So this was kind of an ongoing thing for a while. She would always like have these stories and stuff, and it was just really, really fucking insane past a certain point. So she would constantly, one of the weird things about the entire time we were together is she would constantly say, "I've been raped, I've been raped." The entire time that we were together over the course of almost 3 years was literally her every other month claiming that she was sexually assaulted. I would get a hold of the police because I would want to know, hey guys, you know, what are you guys doing about this? How is this being investigated? Things like that, because I care. and they would be like, there was no rape, you know. And eventually the RCMP did get sick of my shit because she was making constant claims of rape, but they had no record of it. You know, they were like, how many times are they going to have to say, no, dude, there's nothing here, move on? And so she would constantly say this all the time. And then finally, she gets mad and she's like, okay, screenshot whatever I put. I don't care. People did. They screenshot the shit out of this. And so it was very, very strange. And, you know, it just kind of went and tries to go and give her sympathy and stuff over the internet, you know, because they realize that everything's kind of a solid shit show at this point. And so she's like, I've been fighting my whole life, which, you know, I can't really comment on that, on whether or not it's true. I don't have her whole life at my disposal. And, you know, it just gets kind of weird. Like, she would eventually throw these extended pity parties to go and try to get as much attention as possible. And it would ramp really, really hard. And so the pity party continues, and she's like, I can't fix it. I want to. And towards the end of our relationship, I would constantly tell her, "Hun, we need to get you checked into mental health services. None of this shit's healthy." And so she refused. She was like, "It's never going to change anything. They're going to throw me away. You know, they're going to lock me up and you'll never see me again." It was just really kind of oddball, you know. And so I found out that she has borderline personality disorder as well as narcissistic personality disorder. She's a cluster B. And so this comment right here is a direct reference to unstable self image and identity. And she doesn't really know who or what she is. She has a tendency to emulate everything around her. And so that's what we typically would see with stuff like this. Like, I never knew what she was doing from one day to the next. And she claims right here that she'll never be mean and stuff. But my entire duration towards the end of the relationship, years 2 and 3, you know, she was actually pretty mean a lot of the time to people around her as well as myself. And so she claims that she'll be fair and stuff, but I found that the relationship was never really like that. There wasn't really any sort of fairness to it. It was literally a bunch of goalpost moving, and it just wasn't really that great. So she claims that people are still hurting her and everything else. I never really understood who the hell she was talking about. She would constantly say, "Oh, they're still hurting me." I thought that it was some form of PTSD for a while. I was like, maybe she's just reliving it, you know. And so I wouldn't so much humor it, but it'd be like, okay, hon, I get it. You know, we're gonna go ahead and work through it. That's kind of how I would go and manage it, more or less. And so she would eventually try to go and get more attention in chat, and so she would context cry and stuff and say that she's upset, and um, it wasn't really anything great. And she did have a tendency to cry all the time. Um, Times were good, she would cry. Times were bad, she would cry. And so she just kind of goes and just keeps trauma dumping in the chat and stuff. And um, she was complaining that I never get anyone giving a shit about me, and that was a lie. Like, I loved her for the entire duration that we were together, but I couldn't sit there and realistically stay in that relationship knowing that she was like this, more or less. Like, if she was going and getting help, that would be one thing, and I'd be like, oh, okay, you know, we can work on this. But she never really wanted to, and it wasn't getting better, it was only getting worse. So I had to make an executive choice at that point to be like, oh, okay, you know, this is not healthy. It's time for me to go. So she would constantly say that she's broken. I would always reassure her in the relationship that she's not, that it can be worked on and improved, and that I was willing to go and do it with her, essentially. And she never really wanted to hear that, though. She'd be like, oh, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. And it just wasn't really that great. And so she's like, I got hurt by people. I don't know how to be okay. I'm trying so hard. I would frequently say, hey, hon, let's get you checked into mental health services, more or less like therapy, meds if needed, things like that. And she would never want to do it. So I had struggled the entire last year that we were together. I'd be like, hey, hon, we need to go and work on you. And things were falling apart, but I still kept like trying to go and get her help. And she would constantly say, you're trying to control me and all this other stuff. I wasn't trying to control her. I was trying to get her help because it sucked seeing her like that. And I wanted better for her. But she would constantly fight me about it all the time. And it just wasn't really that great. So she sits there and says, I try to brighten everyone's day and people just hurt me all the time. This is a lie. Whenever she brightens people's days and stuff, they don't try to hurt her. They're actually really grateful that she's there, more or less. You know, a lot of people were actually really excited to go and see her on a regular basis, and she never really was able to see it. She also had this other delusion that people were just using her to moderate and everything else, and it was just so fucking oddball. So she makes the pity party continues, and she's like, I've been thrown away my whole life. It's so strange not to be. And like first she says, oh hey, I've been thrown away, and then oh I'm not being thrown away, and like it was this constant back and forth that I would constantly see reflected in our relationship that we had together. And so finally she's like, sorry, I'll be quiet, have a lovely day. She would say this numerous times throughout the entire duration of this cast. So, oh, that one wound up in the wrong folder. Let's see. And then chat just like tries to console her throughout the entire time that she was going and doing this, but they were kind of buying into this idea, well, this delusion she had where everybody's just evil and out to get her, and it was very, very strange, and I never really understood it and stuff because I would constantly tell her, hon, not everybody hates you. You're going to have people that don't really care for you that much, but not everybody hates you. And so she's like, I don't expect everyone to have an answer. Just talking to my sisters, mostly just hurting, but thank you for caring. And like the entire time we were together, I understood that she was like hurting and stuff, but what had mainly driven me away was the lying, the cheating, the anger issues, the verbal and emotional abuse, and a lot of the manipulation as well. It wasn't really getting better, so I was like, yeah, I'm out. And let's see here. So then the pity party kind of continues, context crying, things like that. Nothing really nothing really new here, and then we swap up the mask and stuff, and it's it just kind of went on for like a really, really long time. So eventually she would try to be controlling in her own right, and she would tell Zoe that she wanted to do some things, in this case be a moderator, and Zoe was like, I'm sorry, Annie, I can't do that. And then Annie would be like, I'm not asking for permission and all this other stuff. And eventually she gets mad because everybody in chat is trying to console her, and she's like, soak me and give me charity loves and I'll take them. Love the charity, still know if somebody's bullshitting or not. Like she would literally kiss up to people, and then she would go and like tear into people. And like she didn't really go and treat them too well, and it was really reflected, I think, with this comment when people were trying to legitimately be kind, and she was just kind of going and doing her thing. And Zoe was trying to micromanage it at the time. It wasn't really that great. And so she's like, I always care. And Zoe was like, I know you do, which, is a reasonable answer. And so she'd be like, listen, girl, I care about you always. What the fuck? And then she would try to like force hugs and everything else. And Zoe would sit there and say, I have a lot of people that care about me. And so she goes, I've got Darren and everybody else. And so she would get mad and say, fuck that shit. I'm always here for you. And yeah, I don't give a fuck what your mods know. Do you know how much I love you, girl, and everything else? And it was just like this kind of controlling aspect of her that she went ahead and had, more or less. So it was just kind of going from bad to worse, and it just wasn't really that great. And she would eventually try to control more and say, I'm not asking you to do what you feel. That's pretty damn controlling, I think, because I feel like you should always go with your gut. If you have somebody sitting there saying, I'm not asking you to do what you feel, that's a beeline for straight control, at least from what I can see looking at it from here and stuff. And it just wasn't really that great. In the relationship, I would always go and be accused of trying to be controlling and stuff, but I found out later that this is just projection that narcissists have a tendency to do. So this is literally nothing. Oh, yeah, here we go. So whenever she would go and get resistance to something she would want to do, she would be like, I'm asking fucking nicely. Like, she would use, like, if she didn't get what she wanted, she would use aggression to try to go and get it. And it wasn't really that great per se. So this is when she mentions Queen Homicida that we covered earlier in this video. And so she's trying to do a rudimentary form of networking where she's like, I'll get this person to work with that person. And it's just very, very strange. And so we see a lot of manipulation, I think. And so she's like, she'll do it because I asked her and because I asked him nicely and all this other stuff, and because I love him, but because I never asked for anything, which is a lie. She would ask for a lot of stuff. And I've known them for years and all this other stuff, and it was just really kind of strange, and it wasn't really getting any better. So she tries to elevate herself to the top with this comment. So Zoe was like, I have all these people that, I love and stuff, and Darren's previous tag was DC Studio, and so she was trying to elevate herself above them. And so she's like, I know Darren's amazing, but you got to keep all your solid people in mind. They deserve it too. This is a direct reference to her because out of that entire conversation, she was the only one that was actually left out, more or less. And so she openly admits that she knows that DC is her BFF, but please show love to everyone. She already was showing love to everybody at the time. This is a direct reference, a very subtle one, but a direct one nonetheless, that is referencing her. She's trying to say, hey, don't be like this to me, and it just wasn't really working out for her. But yeah, it just kind of kept getting worse. And so she's like, I love DC too. He's awesome, but everybody's important, girl. It's important to note that when she says this, she's not talking about the entire chat. She would say this only if she felt that she was excluded. And so we would see this comment used over and over again. And it wasn't like this wasn't the only chat that she would go and do this. And when we were together and I watched her mod for other people and stuff, she would do this all the time if she felt that she was underappreciated and stuff, even if she wasn't really doing anything. So with this, there was like a lot of delusion here because I did look into this. And so this cast happened a little bit earlier in the following year. And so with this, what wound up happening is she claims that she got the shit beaten out of her by, I'm assuming that's supposed to be multiple, large men. Weeks ago, I've been in and out of doctors with 5 fractures and healing since. This story is the same one that she had told me almost a year ago. She was claiming that she was jumped in her backyard and her limbs were broken, but they never gave her casts or wraps or anything that would be remotely useful for this. So, the delusion kind of continues, and she's like, what I deserve isn't the same thing as what happens. Thank you for thinking so and supporting me. Like, she would fish around for sympathy, and then she would reply with stuff like this. And so the thing doubles down, And she's like, big fucking man, you know, blah, 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 blah. And she claims that, you know, she pushes through it and she is kind while being kind. I find that she wasn't really that kind of a human being because she would be quote, quote, kind to people and expect to get something out of it later, but that's not what being kind really is about. Being kind, for me at least, is about doing something because you can, because you want better for that human being. And so, you know, that's how I looked at it. And so she goes again for like the fifth time. She's like, sorry, I'll shut up now. And she's like, I love you, Zoe, and thank you for being so kind to me. Again, fishing around for attention. So here she claims she's like, I'm on gabapentin and tramadol and drugged to sleep through it. I'm kind of getting by and saying fuck the doctor to be TBH. Well, to be honest. So the thing is she would have to go to a doctor to get gabapentin and tramadol. So she couldn't really be able to sit there and say, I'm saying fuck the doctor, to be honest, because she would still need to go see a doctor to get these drugs. She would not be able to self prescribe. And then it's also worth noting that the entire time we were together, she said that she was allergic to tramadol. So how can you sit there and say, hey, you know, I'm getting through it on gabapentin and tramadol? You're sitting there saying you're allergic to tramadol. You would be dead taking it. So DC here, he's like, you know, he's trying to support her and stuff, which is great, you know. But I think that they were trying to run damage control at this time as well. Like, I think they were literally sitting there and they were like, okay, you know, this is a shit show. We got to run damage control to make sure that it's never this bad, you know. So it was kind of weird. She claims that she spent Christmas with a bunch of. Oop, hold on a second. I gotta scroll back down again. But she was sitting there claiming that she spent Christmas with a bunch of cops around her with her feet in stirrups, telling me that I was lying. Yes. The weird thing about this is I was moderating for a friend of mine throughout Christmas, and she spent. He was doing a 24-hour Christmas stream because he was single, had no wife, no kids. She spent the entire time in there. So we have that entire chat logged. So how can she sit there and say I spent all Christmas with a bunch of cops around me with my feet in stirrups telling me that I was lying if she was literally spending all of it on Twitch? So if she went and she was like sexually assaulted and everything else and she spent Christmas going and having the cops talk shit to her essentially, then she would have not been posting in my friend Daryl's stream at all. She was posting pretty consistently throughout the entire day and then well into the night before she had gone to bed. So we have this block of text here, and she's like, I had some fucking officer tell me I was lying because I didn't have any was supporting my case of being assaulted by a guy, and oh god, this is written so badly. Then I almost got put away for accusing people of doing it and fought for my own rights and got disregarded with everything I said. How the hell would you be able to do this over the course of like a single day? You're sitting there saying I spent Christmas in there. Okay, that's fine, whatever. How the hell over the course of 24 hours can you go fight for your rights, um, get tossed out by the police, like all this stuff? I mean, it seems like a little bit of a fucking stretch to go and like try to do this in 24 hours, but it was just really weird, you know. Like she tries to pump up this certain level of heroism and she's like, I had to fight for my own rights and, you know, look at how tough I am. And I would see this, you know, quite a bit. You know, this behavior in general is just fucking insane sometimes. So she doubles down on the whole cops hate me bullshit, and she's like, police just accuse me of lying and never protect me anyways. I had to deal with the police quite a bit whenever we were in a relationship together and stuff. The police would openly admit that she is batshit crazy and that she has a problem with lying in general. And it was past a certain point that they went ahead and cut support for me because she was constantly saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I would have to call the police about it because it would have me so strung out that I wasn't sure if she was actually going to do it or not, you know. And And so the pity doubles down, and she's like, it's more convenient for them. What actually happened, they don't care. They just let me be hurt, and blah, 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 blah. And she claims that she's been so tired from fighting this for years. The entire time we're together, I went and I actually talked to the police about this, and they were like, "Yeah, we have no record of this. We take rape seriously. We investigate all of it. You know, the city that she was living in, it had a pretty high murder rate, but when it came to rape and stuff, they always buckled down with it. And so she's claiming, hey, it's been going on for years. A lot of the times, when she would sit there and say, hey, I've been assaulted, she would literally go and say, oh, I've been assaulted. I would be like, oh my God, what happened? Because, concern. She wouldn't be able to explain any details of it. One of the weirder things is she sat there. There was one story she had told me where she was like, I was raped by 5 men out on the sidewalk, and I was unconscious for all of it. If you were unconscious for it, then how do you know that there was like 5 men there? And furthermore, if it's like in public on a sidewalk, you would have seriously thought that somebody would have actually stopped and, I don't know, done something about it. Like, I really just, I think as the relationship went on, I had a hard time going and believing anything that she said because I wasn't really able to ever take it seriously with as fantastical as bullshit was getting. And so she goes and she victimizes herself and says, I get assaulted and get the cops pointing fingers at me on top of it, yada yada. And they never, I'm assuming, never stand up for women. It's a very popular narrative that I see with a lot of feminists that are like, oh, nobody's standing up for women, cops don't do it. So this was an argument that I would see all the time. They never stand up for women, but if I go and double check with them, I can literally be like, oh, okay, well, what are you guys doing about this? And like, we have no report of this. And I'd have to go back and double check and be like, Hunter, are you sure you reported this? Yes, I reported this. And when you have sexual assault on top of sexual assault on top of sexual assault, and then you have another one side saying I reported it, the other side saying no, we have no such thing. It's hard to believe any of this. I believe that lying about rape is just as bad as rape because it damages credibility, which is a lifelong thing. You never really completely get it back. So, LOL, I got raped by 2 large men and then had to report it, and then they made me spend my Christmas alone reporting bullshit I didn't want to talk about. Again, this doesn't really. This is a lie because she was hanging out in a friend of mine's cast, going and talking pretty much the entire day, most of the evening, and it just doesn't check out. Like, we literally have her chat logs from that stream still, and so it makes no sense to sit there and say I spent Christmas alone. I was raped, and it's just very oddball, I think, and I had a hard time really trusting anything out of her because of stuff like this. And so she's like, why did they make me report it? I just wanted to go home and sleep. She was already home talking in Twitch chat. And so I don't think, in all honesty, if she was sexually assaulted, it would be really fucking strange to go and be raped and then say, like, she was on Twitch mobile, right? Going and sitting there saying all this crazy shit in chat. Like, when all the times that I was sexually assaulted, I was not hanging out on a website at all. Like, I was in no fucking shape to hang out on a website. I was completely and utterly fucking wrecked from it happening and stuff. And so I find a lot of these claims like really hard to believe. And then with her having like a history of claiming rape with no real paper trail, like no documentation whatsoever to back it up when people can go and check, it makes it hard to really believe anything that comes out of her mouth. So it's really, really weird. This statement doesn't check out, I don't think. There's no reason for a doctor to sit there and say that you're not good enough. It literally makes no sense. And then she's like, I don't have any family. I'm trying. There's only so far I can go. And it was really just kind of oddball, because she had a lot of people that cared about her, you know. Like there was like a lot of people that loved that woman, even with like all of her problems and stuff. There was like a lot of people that just loved the hell out of her, and so like I feel like the statement's not really being made in good faith. Her friends literally were her family. Both of her parents, as far as I'm aware, had passed on and stuff, and but she still had like a lot of friends to go and back her up. So. So at this point, she's trying to. Sometimes talks with her would get like really, really strange. And so she was trying to get Zoe into Discord, like a private Discord room to go and talk to her and stuff. And somebody had like accused her of sleeping with Zoe, and it was meant to be a joke. And, obviously nobody's taking it seriously at this point. Zoe sure as hell didn't. And so Annie took it seriously, and she's like, if I wanted to give my pussy to Ghost, I would, but that's not what this is about. He's my big brother. Ghost was actually older than her, and he did look after her a fair bit, but he cut support for her when she had started abusing me, out of all things. Like, Ghost Dog, strangely enough, even though shit was fucked, he was one of the first to literally sit there and be like, hey, this is not okay, hon. You shouldn't be doing this. And so he goes and he's like, we need to chat. And I'm not sure what the hell happened with his last comment. Go ahead and fucking question. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be me or just M or whatever the case may be. And it's just really kind of oddball. She was constantly triggered throughout the entire stream. And so she starts fighting with this gentleman right here, and she's like, let's do this. I wasn't done with you. And then the guy was just joking with her. She calls him a pussy, and then states that he can't measure up to her and everything else. And um, Typo is literally trying to move on with the conversation because she's just picking fights with him left and right, and it just wasn't really that great. So Annie tries to force herself on Zoe some more and plagiarize herself as a sound engineer, and she's like, I'm not doing any of that free work shit. I don't really understand how she can claim that she's going to do work on it. She didn't have the knowledge to do so. If she would have, what I was working on at the time would have not seemed alien to her. Or at least that's, my opinion on it per se. And so she goes and she gets more aggressive. These earlier people can fuck off. And me and you can talk to the sound person and plan things together. So the thing that's weird is she's saying that she's the sound person, but then she's like going to go and talk to the sound person. So the question I found myself asking is, okay, if you're the sound person, why would you need to go and question the sound person? You would essentially be talking to yourself at that point, since you claim that you can do the work. And so it's very, very oddball. And so she goes and attacks Sharp TV. You seem to think I've taken anything for free. There's been a lot of things that she's taken for free. She took, at the time we were together, she was taking a lot of people's help. She had zero issue with me paying her bills. Like, she was going and taking a hell of a lot for free. At the time, I had paid for her dog's surgery as well. She would feed her chihuahua wet food all the time, and it led to a dental abscess caused by rotting teeth. And I had to step in with 2 grand and actually pay the bill because she couldn't afford it. And I never claimed that. I never claimed that money back. Essentially, like, it just seemed kind of rude to do. Like, it shouldn't be criminal to want to keep your animals around. So this is literally a direct lie. So she bulks up and she's like, I'll guarantee I'll kick their asses. And then everything else, again, this is a lot of the bravado that I would typically see out of her. And every time her anger would flare, because she was a pretty angry human being, I would see stuff like this. And it wasn't really that great. And so she would be like, don't let me pressure you, decide yourself. But as we saw with the earlier screenshots, she's like, oh, hey, fuck what you feel and everything else. So it contradicts, this statement contradicts the previous one. So let's see. This is like a chunk of another piece of text. So she talks about how she'll go and tear a person's whole fucking organization apart and that she's not afraid and all this other stuff. She's actually a very timid human being until she gets angry. But even when angry, she never really does anything. Like, she'll threaten it, she'll orate it, like, very, very heavily. I'll fuck you up. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of that. Blah, 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 blah. I'm not afraid. But nothing would ever happen. It would be a non existent, it's a non starter. And so she's like, I won't, literally, I won't even second guess it. I'll just blast your boss's fucking head off. And, I would see threats like this when we were going and spending time together as well. She didn't get along with her neighbors, and she would stand in the doorway while I was on the mic with her, and she would verbally threaten them, the neighbors that she had across the street. And so it wasn't really that great, so we can just see how it just kind of progresses as it goes on and stuff. So this is a segment that is about the band Everlit, and she's trying to sit there and say that she's going to be the bring the band into the stream and stuff, and that that she's friends with these people and everything else, and yada yada yada, and everything that everything else that she claims all the time, and it's really nothing new at this point. And so she's like, hey, I know these people, blah blah blah. Ghost realizes that Anne's kind of off the rails at this point, and he's like, I know that that I'm always here for you and everything else. So she's like, I have pics of them opening for Avenged Sevenfold. I'll give you a link of their newer single, blah, 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 blah. And she just really kind of doubles down on this whole I'm going to use this band to boost your viewership, and we're going to turn it into this giant thing. And on Twitter, the band wound up blocking her, and she threw a fit because people were like screenshotting this and then posting it to Twitter. And the band was like, yeah, this is an issue, and then just went and had let her go, essentially, at that point, because they were following her, and they're like, no, you're not healthy. You gotta go. And so she has a very unrealistic expectation of what friends are, and so she's like, I'll be talking to them more to book them up, and she doesn't know how to book bands whatsoever, at all, because we had talked about it when we were dating and stuff, and it's just lie on lie on lie, and it's fucking insane past a certain point. And so she's like, I'll make my return, what is it? And make my return a live metal concert with 3 Canada bands. Like, she's never done live music on a scale like that, like at all, and so she has this delusion of making this grand comeback, essentially, and it was just really, really weird. And so we see the whole attempt of using a band, and then self promotion and everything else, and the claim that she's been talking to these guys for like 5 years, yada yada yada, and it just never panned out. Oh, hello. Okay. Oh, holy shit. I am not going to be able to read that, I don't think. Actually, hold up, I may be able to. Oh, it's this goddamn thing. Okay. So she is literally in a art streamers chat that I used to enjoy hanging out in. This streamer is no longer around. Annie wound up damaging her reputation so damn bad that she no longer casts. And so she's trying to claim to be a Twitch moderator and stuff, and so she's just kind of going through and trying to help, well, quote quote, help the streamer and stuff. And so she's like, okay, yeah, tablet uses the same as mobile OS. The tablet is mobile OS. And so it's like very strange how she just doesn't really realize that. And then she tries to go and treat the person like a child a little bit and try to like guide them through it. And this is a direct reference to her claiming to be Global Mod, obviously, as you can see. And so she has the other claim of Global Mod right there, claiming that it's temp work. Oh, God. So this comment that you would typically see right here is she had this weird kind of fetish for wanting people to go and paint her. So there was a guy on Twitch named I Paint Creatures, and he would do some of the craziest fucking art. Like, I loved this man's work. He just did so much good stuff. And so she's like, I want you to paint me. And um, he was like, I can do that. I'll paint you as a monster, because that's kind of like his shtick. If somebody went and subbed, he would go and sketch them. And it was just really cool. It ended up in a book. So she'll be like, oh my God, yes, I'll hang it on my music room and promote you with it. But the thing is she doesn't have a musical presence. Like, people aren't walking into her house and stuff and saying, hey, whose, painting is that? And so she never really thought this one through, I don't think. And so she's like, okay, how about this? A painting of something when you think of me. And I would see this a lot. Like, she would want people to idolize her. Why aren't people thinking of me? She used to mod for Sidecar Angel. And funny story, Angel one day was painting a pasty, a pasty white woman with black hair, and she was kind of like lanky and stuff. And Annie thought that it was her, and so she had this idea in her head that if somebody was doing art, it was most likely going to be about her, when that is not the case, like, at all, and so she always kind of walked around with this delusion and this need for adulation, more or less. So, let's see. So she does know how to draw a little bit. And so she's like, you do a painting like that for me, and I'll do a sketch piece like that for you. And so they could cast her at the time. IPC was like, no, you don't have to do that. So he went ahead, he did the sketch of her, and then the sketch for him never materialized. It just never showed up, and he had made a comment about it, and it just wasn't really that great and stuff. And so she keeps trying to weasel in for a moderator position by trying to be helpful. And so I would see this line of behavior essentially with every new stream that she would walk into. Oh, if I'm helpful enough, they'll give me a sword. And after a while, I found it to be incredibly disingenuous, and it just wasn't really super amazeballs. And so she just throughout the entire duration, she goes and um, continues doing it essentially. And so she would eventually, when she was trying to moderate for my stream, I already had a bunch of people that I had for moderators. I had DTNZ as well as Oasis Path Ones or Oasis Path One. Sorry, that's speech impediment. And both of them were amazing mods. They knew their shit up and down, backwards and forwards. And so she would try to go and do this as well, and treat them as idiots as an end result, thinking that they didn't really know what the hell it was that they were doing and stuff. And so IPC eventually asked her, hey, what do you want me to draw? And she doubles down with the adulation. She's like, I want you to create something, whatever you decide to do, with a musical touch, whatever you want, something that comes to your mind when you think of me. And so she always wanted to be on people's minds and stuff, instead of just giving the guy like freedom to do whatever. She's like, oh, whenever you think of me. It was just really fucking cheeseball. And so this just kind of goes down, and she goes and this is an expansion of the previous screenshot where she talks about global moderation, and she tries really hard to sell it because she wanted people to take her seriously and respect her and stuff, but a lot of people would end up seeing through it, and it wouldn't really it wasn't really something that would pan out for her. So she's like, I was originally asked to do it when Twitch started implementing chat bots for the first time after years of Merc chat client bot coding work. She doesn't know how to code whatsoever. She has no fucking clue how to code. She doesn't even understand how the hell it works. So, let's see. She was insinuating that she knows how to do global mod work because she has been doing it when they started implementing chatbots for the first time. Chatbots predate global modhood by like 5 years. Like literally, like there is a 5 year gap. So she would never be able to go and be a global mod while they were going and implementing chatbots for the first time. So she's like, so I just kind of kept trying to be helpful and moved into regular moderation on my own. That's not how that works. They invite you, you just don't move into it, and so she buckles down on the whole I do too much sometimes. And so she's like, on Twitch old, I need a walker, which her account is pretty old. So So this is literally this is a throwback to Queen Homicida's cast. There's her remotes and stuff. I don't think she's on Twitch anymore, but the Dino guy that she was arguing with goes and she finally gets mad and swings at him. And it's meant to be a joke as well. And so Annie decides to open her mouth again. She's like, "You made a bad fucking impression with some of us when you walked in originally, just saying." And she doesn't realize that these deleted messages, his timeout was literally done as a joke. They were joking. She was not. So in Queen's chat, she would again float the lie of just global moderation and everything else. And she's like, I should go browse and see what newer positions they're filling and all this other stuff. Like, she would literally just kind of make shit up on the fly. And it would, of course, never go anywhere. And then she's like, I could probably apply for the network security department. That is a throwback to me because I would typically work security and stuff, and she would try to pass it off as her own. And so it wouldn't really work for her and stuff. And it was just weird because she was kind of blending my life and her life together. So she's like, she floats the entire goddamn thing of, I was working with X, Y, and Z, and she's like, I would probably be fantastic in growth and marketing. She doesn't know how to do marketing. She couldn't even market herself correctly. Normally, I would have to go and give her a hand with branding and marketing and stuff. I'm not the best at it, but I'm competent enough to get by. And so it just really, shit just kind of kept rolling downhill, essentially. And it was just really kind of awful. So with this particular dude that I had ran across at the time, there was I was streaming at the time, and this gentleman, who I'm assuming he's a guy, I could be wrong. He had come in and said that they were dating at the time and stuff, and I had like laughed it off because I would get like fucking oddball fucking claims on Twitch all the time, and so I was kind of getting a little bit aggressive with him because I was trying to cast at the time and juggle whispers, and I was supposed to be on break. I was streaming Killing Floor 2 at the time. And so I eventually started grilling this dude, and he was going and talking about her entire life and stuff, and he just knew way too much intimate information and stuff, and um, oh, what is it? He just knew way too much fucking information and stuff about her that normal people probably wouldn't have, like how old the dog is and stuff, because she didn't talk about her dog much. She didn't talk about her teeth either and how they're broken, and it was just really kind of ridiculous at the time, and so he went through the entire duration, and he would just go and just continuously do this stuff, and he knew everything about her ink, and it was just a little too close for comfort. And so eventually I had gotten sick of it. Um, I knew that I wasn't going to stay with her at this point. Like, this was kind of the breaking point for me. I was trying to go, this was like a couple of months before I went and I broke it off with her because I just didn't want this anymore. Like, I had started realistically cranking up to leave at this point. Like, I knew that the relationship was kind of a wash at this point. I had started losing my temper, a good way through this. And so it just really wasn't really getting any better per se. And so at this point, I had started taking screenshots because I was just really, really pissed with everything, and I just didn't really want to deal with it. I didn't really want to fuck with it or anything. It was just getting kind of insane at that point. So I left off on ARC. I has a lot of evidence to go through. So, what this next batch of stuff is she was eventually called out on Twitter for lying about moderating for Elohim. And this entire wash is literally everybody doing their investigative work and basically proving to her that she's a liar. She has a new Twitter now, but her old account is Alexis Ann 1982. And so, as you can see, pretty much everybody and their damn grandmother is fully aware of this. And even Lucky right there calls it out, and it just kind of went from bad to worse. And Zoe was tagged in it because this stemmed from her cast, more or less. And at this point, I went ahead and blocked her because she had started a smear campaign. She was literally trying to go and blame me for everything. She's like, she had made the claim I was raped by Rain, which that is a lie because we never met. She's 2,800 miles away. I can't have sexual contact with anybody that is that far away. I'm not talented like that. And so they would go and just call her out. And Elo, like, from what I understand, it happened on this gentleman's birthday, which is fucking awful. And so it was just, let's see, QR. Okay, go over to T. It was just one of the worst things ever. So eventually, Elohim went and posted a screenshot where he had reached out to Annie and stuff, and he was like, "Who are you and why are you telling people that you modded for me?" She blocked him. And so it was really, she had eventually tried to lie about this later, and she's like, "It's because I'm not in the same server as you," and all this other shit. And it just wasn't really getting any better. The lies were just kind of piling on top of each other, and she wasn't really able to keep up with it, essentially. So she had hosted a smear campaign against me for, oh man, I want to say about a month and a half. It was at its worst for a week. Eventually, I had come forward and I had started batting back. I had gone no contact with her at the end of October, and I flat out said, "Hey, I haven't had contact with her. I have no idea what the hell's going on." You know, my friends sometimes would try to keep me up to date on her, but I didn't really care. Like, I was enrolled in therapy at that point, and I was working on trying to reverse the damage. And my therapist is like, go no contact, don't give her any attention. You're not going to be able to fix this. Just move on. And I said, okay. So Elo here is like, hey, we're going to post the original email. And I want to apologize about it. Like, on this dude's fucking birthday, he was literally like, hey, I'm sorry. This shouldn't be like this. Let me mop this fuck up. And so everybody literally just kind of weighed in on it at this point. My abuse was actually exposed online. It was very awkward. I wasn't ready for it at all. She was trying to say, oh, I have evidence I need to show that I'm being abused, yada, yada, yada. And so this gentleman is friends with one of the larger casters that she used to mod for. They sat down, they investigated the entire situation from top to bottom, and they had a what is it? They went ahead and they had a talk about it, and then the rest of chat literally just continuously showed that she was going and lying about it, and then here they are going and like pulling her chat logs, so you literally could not hide jack shit from the internet. And it was just going, and everything was just kind of sweltering at that point. Like it was just kind of like fever pitch. She tried to drag me into it a multitude of times, going as far as to insult me whenever the hell she would go and get a chance. And so these screenshots are literally just the entire conversation that had, what is it, going and investigating it and everything else. And, the consensus they had, this gentleman's trying to stand up for her and stuff, which I get that. But I think that he was like going and he had quite a few good things to say about it. Are they adult? Are they a suicide risk? All of the information being provided in good faith. I think this guy kind of nailed it the same way that I would have nailed it. I would have investigated it, I think, a little bit more strictly and stuff, but I kind of admire what this guy was doing because he wasn't really willing to just go and resort to mob violence and stuff. And eventually, I had, with her shoving me in the spot like that, or the spotlight like that, I had to come out about my abuse. I pulled all of my phone records, all of my Discord DMs, all of my Twitch whispers, like pretty much every single piece of contact that we had. I had made a giant folder out of it. I made that folder publicly available to everybody, and I said, hey, tell you what, you can go and you can scrutinize all of this if you want, and so that was pretty much where it was at for me. And so it was really weird. He was like, I don't know who was talked to and what was said, so I reached out the best way to stop the poison from spreading. At this point, what this man's doing is just running damage control because he doesn't want this shit to spread. I get it, like when you have somebody that's being aggressive with people, then claiming that they moderate for you, you have to do shit like this because it can very easily damage your reputation. And so this is what this man is doing. A lot of people disagreed with how the situation was handled. I think it wasn't really handled that well, in all honesty. Like, I understand why it happened and stuff, but at the same time, I don't really think that it was handled very well. Like, I don't think that this generally, like, I don't think that putting her on blast like that was really that great, but at the same time, he did reach out to her. She, what is it? She just really, it was just bad. Like, this whole fucking stint was a goddamn shit show, and I hated it because at this time what is it, at this time I was trying to move on with my life, and then I was logging into Twitter. I had people mentioning me. I would openly admit I didn't want to be fucking a part of this shit. I just hated it. It wasn't really that great. And so this guy and Elo are like kind of going and talking back and forth about it. And I personally think that Almighty is actually making some good points and stuff. He's asking questions that need to be asked. And so Elo was just honest about it. He's like, the point of that post was to prove that this person was not a mod by showing facts, chat logs. That's it. He goes and he tries to work with this guy, and he just wasn't really happening. And so I think that they both have points. On one end, this gentleman's going and trying to go and what is it? He's trying to defend his reputation essentially. And then this guy's like, hey, why don't we have, better questions being asked? Like, why isn't this going as far as it should be? You know. And so it just really was, this entire stint was just depressing to watch. So apparently Elohim and his family at one point had gone and investigated it. fully and stuff. They went around, they looked, they went ahead and handled it essentially, and he, reconciles with this gentleman right here and stuff. It wasn't a bad conversation, but I feel that it's a conversation that should have never had to happen because things like this shouldn't have to happen, more or less. And so shit just kind of kept, shit just kind of kept rolling downhill with him and this gentleman, and it just wasn't really, it wasn't really great. So I really just kind of hated it a fair bit. So she was going, um, I had mutuals with her. They would send me shit like this a lot of the time off of their phones and stuff, and I would literally have to be like, what is this, more or less. I would explain to them that, she was blocked and everything else, and they would go screenshot the they would go and screenshot the transaction and still mail it to me. I didn't really care for it. I already had her blocked at that point. So this guy is fully aware of what's going on. Calls himself Button Pusher, and they go and they have like this conversation. And so she goes and she's like, I have very valid proof that, this person, she was basically trying to say my account was hacked. Rain went ahead and posted all this super stupid, silly shit and all these lies and crap. And so the problem with this is that she was going and saying, hey, this is a recent thing, but these issues, when you actually look at them, they had been going back for like years, like long before she had met me, kind of years. And so she tries to go and do the whole if I go public with it, they get their reaction. At the time, I just didn't give a shit. I know that I probably should have, but I was focusing on my life, getting my health in order. My health was just in the fucking gutter at the time. I was in and out of hospitals, which she would later try to say that it never happened. And so she goes and, even with my medical records kind of staring her in the face, she would eventually go and have this conversation with this guy. And it really just wasn't that, it wasn't really that great whatsoever. And so it really was just kind of insane. So this guy goes and he leads by example. And so she was like, I'm currently planning on how to put a formal case together about it. The case never happened at all. Nothing happened. She literally just ran from it because she was getting swamped on Twitter so hard that there was nothing good coming from it. She couldn't go and defend herself from any of it because people were investigating, realizing that she was full of shit, pretty much everything. And so this guy's like trying to encourage a proper resolution. He's like, hey, if you're being abused, you got to go to the authorities about this. If your account was broken into, you got to do something about it. You got to do something to undo the damage. Nothing happened. Nothing at all. It just kind of continued going down and further into the hole, essentially. And so it was never handled with the proper channels, whatever the hell that was supposed to mean, And it was really insane, I think. And then everybody continues to go and call her out on her lies. So eventually she had drawn the ire of some really huge fucking dudes. And so I was, Twitter was going through this phase where it was like recommending tweets to you, which they continue to do to this day. And so this account had eventually gotten a hold of her, quite literally, like just totally tore into her ass, and it was just fucking insane. And at this point, I was in the process of defending myself because I was fighting an accusation of rape, an accusation of abuse. At this point, I had already released all of my fucking info and stuff, and then what had happened with these screenshots essentially is I had mutuals that were like, hey, she's going to try to do some sketchy shit. We're going to go ahead and screenshot this. and then we're going to go ahead and send it to you. And at the time, downloads for Discord weren't working, so I'd have to go and then screenshot it on my phone and then archive it on a computer. It was just like a hell of a fucking thing. And so at this point, the smear campaign was in full effect. And people were like, "Did you really sexually assault her?" I would say, "No, we've never met." And then she lies right here and she's like, "The original report posted is full of wild accusations." They weren't wild accusations, essentially. It was literally just basic investigating, because she would claim stuff all the time. And then say, about stuff I've never said to anybody. But what they don't realize is when you go and you send a message on Twitch, what it does is it logs the IP address of that Twitch, or that Twitch that message comes from. And so people are able, using plugins, to go and research this. And so she was trying to float this fucking thing where she was like, "Oh, well, somebody had hijacked my computer and posted all this stuff." And like, it was just really, shit was going from bad to worse for her. And um I noticed, like, the entire time she was doing this, she was insinuating that it was me and stuff, but she was like too afraid to say my name for whatever reason. So everybody else continues calling her out at this point, and she just keeps doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. And it just, like, she was doubling down so much that there really was no end to it, more or less. And so this is, oh man, I had friends that were like warning me about shit for a while. And so eventually I had friends that were looking out for me, and they're like, "Raym, you're not going to survive this well unless you go and you start archiving." So a lot of this stuff is just stuff that she would routinely post. And so you could see, like, all of this shit, that was literally just going straight to hell. And it just wasn't really getting any better. She would constantly scream that everybody else is being toxic and everybody hated her and all this other stuff, like she would victimize herself so heavily. So this was right after I went ahead and this is right after I had broken up with her, essentially, like not even 23 days out, more or less. And she was going and randomly freaking out because people were like, "Yeah, what you did to Ram was not okay. This is not okay whatsoever." And it just kind of kept rolling downhill, essentially. And I tried to ignore it for a while. Everybody's like, "Dude, don't even fucking give it the time of day." And so I essentially just gray rocked that crap. I was like, no texts, no calls, don't stare at her socials. But things were escalating to such a heavy extent, with her screaming that I had sexually assaulted her and beaten her. Like, there was a point in time where she was trying to sit there and say that I had beat her up and all this other stuff. And but again, we had never met. I can't beat I can't beat what's not there. More or less, it's not how that works. And so it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And so people, when she went through this extended depression phase, people literally started ignoring her. She used to get like a lot of likes and stuff, and then it just became more and more infrequent. People just kind of stopped caring, I think, at that point. And so a lot of what you see here kind of extended over to our relationship, that we used to have before I had gone and dumped her. So this is like from April 2018. At this point, I had not seen her for 3 months, and I was just kind of sitting there, and I was taking some time to myself to recoup, because at the time my doctor was literally saying, you have so much stress on you that it's impacting your health, it's raising inflammation. If you do not stop, you will have a heart attack. So the entire time she was gone, I was literally just kind of sitting there going, I need this, I need this, I need this. And it was just kind of insane. And so most of this is just raw projection, constantly. So they're saying, stay away from people who can't take responsibility for their actions. Like the whole, I'm just going to victimize myself bullshit stretched back like well over a year. And I eventually just got sick of it. I didn't want the abuse. I didn't deserve the abuse. It was driving me to psychosis as well, which is one of the reasons I have to focus on my mental health now. The wear and tear was so damn bad that I wasn't really going and recovering from it whatsoever. It was just like getting worse all the time. And so at that point, leaving became more of a viable option, essentially. It's just something that I was looking towards more and more. So this is another chunk from the Elohim shit that happened. If the pressure would get too high, she would go and do something like this. I'm gone most of 2 weeks fighting to level out my heart, fighting for my life after electrocution, wondering if I'm going to make it. We would see the self victimizing quite a bit, and then the stories would become very fantastical, I think. And so it wasn't uncommon to see stuff like this. She would literally throw temper tantrums and everything else, and people would literally continue to go and call her out. Literally. This gentleman right here just turned around, straight up nailed her to the floor. And there are some people that are grossly unaware of the crap that she's pulling, like this gentleman right here. And so, like, some people were like, what the hell? And then some people were going and, offering up helpful advice, and so she was trying to say that I had accessed her account, but what they failed to take into consideration is when two-factor authentication was released for Twitch, I showed her how to do it because she was worried about her account breaking in, or being broken into. Sorry, that speech impediment. So I literally, the way that her two-factor was set up is she would have to log in on Twitch, and then they would beam a code to her phone. So she would constantly scream, I was broken into, but I wouldn't be able to get into her account like she's claiming that I would if I didn't have her phone. Because I didn't have her phone number, I wouldn't be able to get the text to go and to put in to actually get into the account. So that claim fell on its face pretty goddamn hard. And then this gentleman right here was a guy that was hanging out with her for a while. He came into my chat twice, said that we were fighting too much, and I asked him who's we, and he's like, you and Alexis. And I said, well, she's driving me nuts, essentially. And so he's like, you need to do better. And I said, I'm doing the best I can. The brainwashing was rather insane. I would get people like this quite often that I would get people like this quite often that would go and fight on her behalf, saying I'm doing all this horrible stuff. And I would have to explain to them that that is not the case and that things are heavily distorted, for lack of a better term. So this gentleman eventually had passed away. His depression had overwhelmed him, and he is no longer with us, and it's kind of sad. So people would continue going and busting her and her lies left and right. It just wasn't really, it was not ending well for her. So what wound up happening after that is she had ran, and she had continued stalking me for a couple of months, having people popping into random streams I was in, threatening me. It didn't realistically stop until I had gotten a digital injunction against her. And so after that had happened, the smear eventually died out, So it had died out completely, and I've, for the most part, had peace ever since. But no, a lot of people tried to say that I never had evidence and all this other shit, and everybody has evidence. That's the thing. It wasn't just me. There was like a lot of people looking at that. One of my exes literally looked at what she was doing, and she goes, Raym, you're an asshole, but I'm going to go ahead and screenshot this, and I'll go ahead and send it over to you because this is going to get worse. And you're going to need to go and defend yourself because this smear is not going to get any better. So, with that thought in mind, this pretty much concludes the evidence video showing what everybody had to deal with, the amount of abuse that was kind of pumping out of this person and stuff. I have plans to start working on the first video very soon when I can get some time and stuff, but I wanted to bang out the evidence vid when I could because it was something that people have been nagging me for a while, especially on YouTube. When I talk about abuse and stuff, they're like, you have no proof. Yes, I do. Plenty of proof for the person's behavior and stuff. I don't want to really go and dwell on it any more than what I have to, but for those that are claiming that I have no evidence, here's all of it right here. For all the people that were saying she was never abusive to anybody, here's your evidence right here. We went through, we tackled all of it, and that's pretty much it. So, again, this wasn't really meant to be entertaining. This is meant to be a spotlight on abuse and mental health and some of the bullshit that I had to go through, as well as everybody else. So, with that thought in mind, I greatly appreciate y'all's time and your effort in coming out. There really isn't much to like with this video. So I'm not expecting likes or anything. I'm not even really expecting it to get traction. It's mainly for the sake of my own sanity at this point because people keep hounding and hounding and hounding, and it's actually rather insane. So with that thought in mind, that's going to conclude this chunk of the video, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.